Hey, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. You know, there's this thing that happens when you start diving into Stoicism. You feel like you're supposed to have it all figured out. You watch these motivational clips about Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, and you think, yeah, that's it. I'm going to be unshakable. I'm going to be wise. And then Tuesday hits and your boss says something stupid, and you feel your jaw clench and you're back to square one. But here's what I want to talk about today. There were two Diogenes, and most of us, we've been chasing the wrong version of strength our entire lives. Let me start here. You wake up, your phone is screaming, notifications, messages. Someone left a comment on that thing you posted 3 weeks ago that you'd already forgotten about. Your brain is doing backflips. You think, I need to respond. I need to defend myself. I need to make sure everyone knows I'm right. This is where Diogenes of Babylon enters the scene. He was a Stoic philosopher, a real one, educated, respected, part of the elite circle. He believed that wisdom meant understanding the nature of things, that reason was the highest calling, and that virtue came through knowledge and discipline. Very respectable, very organized. He believed in the system. He believed in climbing it. But here's the kicker. He was also incredibly anxious about maintaining his position. Why? Because he'd built his house on the opinion of others. His wisdom had an address. It had a zip code. It was located precisely where other people said it was. Now Diogenes of Sinope, the other one, he's the guy who allegedly lived in a barrel. Not a real barrel, by the way, more like a large storage vessel. But the point wasn't the barrel. The point was everything he threw out to get into it. He threw out his reputation. He threw out his need to be understood. He threw out the constant, exhausting work of managing an image. One day, supposedly, Alexander the Great, literal conqueror of the known world, guy with infinite power, came to meet him. This is what you imagine, right? This should be the moment. The most powerful man on earth wants an audience with a philosopher, final boss energy. Alexander walks up and says, I am Alexander the Great. I can give you anything you want. What is your desire? And Diogenes looks at him, really looks at him and says, yeah, you're actually blocking my sunlight. Could you move? That's not a barrel joke. That's not cynicism for cynicism's sake. That's a man who has realized something fundamental. The thing you're chasing, the validation you think will set you free, is literally just casting a shadow over what you already have. But here's where most people get it twisted. They hear that story and think, oh, I need to become edgy. I need to be contrarian. I need to reject society and live provocatively. They turn Diogenes into a meme, into a personality brand, into performance rejection theater. That's not it. Let me reframe this. The first principle is about where you're placing your anchor. Diogenes of Babylon was anchored in external validation. His stability was dependent on whether other people continued to think he was wise. It's like building a house on ice. Sure, it feels solid today, but you're one thaw away from everything collapsing. He writes these brilliant logical arguments, teaches intelligent students, maintains relationships with powerful people, and he's constantly checking the temperature. Is the ice still thick? Do they still respect me? Did I say the right thing? Meanwhile, Diogenes of Sinope, this man has anchored himself in something internal, not in arrogance, not in rebellion for rebellion's sake, but in a simple, almost boring observation. What do I actually control right now? This breath, this moment, my response to what's in front of me. That's it. Everything else is noise. Here's what that actually looks like in your life. You're in a meeting. Someone dismisses your idea. Your nervous system is screaming. Your reptile brain wants to prove them wrong. You can feel the need to defend the building in your chest like steam in a kettle. Diogenes of Babylon is doing mental gymnastics. He's crafting the perfect counter-argument. He's worried his reputation just took a hit. He's already thinking about who he should talk to after the meeting to make sure they know he's still competent. Diogenes of Sinope, or rather the principle he represents, would notice the feeling. He'd feel it fully, and then he'd think, okay, my job isn't to control whether they understand my idea. My job is to understand whether I believe in my idea. That's actually in my control. Whether they get it, that's whether. It happens around me. The Stoics had a teaching about this, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus nailed it when he said, it is impossible for a man to be free when he is a slave to his body and his passions, or to external things which are not under his control. But what that really means is this: stop renovating the house next door and spend time on the one you actually own. The second principle is about simplicity, and I mean real simplicity, not Instagram minimalism. Most of us are drowning in complexity because we think complexity equals sophistication. We think that if we just had the right system, the right tool, the right framework, we'd finally get ahead. We're looking for the ancient secret to peace. We think it's hidden somewhere. But simplicity is terrifying because it's immediate. You can't hide in it. Diogenes of Sinope supposedly owned nothing but a cloak, a walking stick and a cup, and then one day he saw a child drinking water from their hands, and he threw the cup away. Most people hear that and think, oh, I need to buy the right expensive minimalist gear and become an aesthetic. That's the opposite of what he's saying. He's saying, anything that stands between you and the direct experience of life, examine it. Maybe it's essential, maybe it's not. For you right now, it might be the email thread you're obsessing over, the relationship status you're curating, the story you've been telling yourself about why you don't deserve what you want, the identity you're managing so carefully that you can't actually be yourself. Throw the cup away. I don't mean quit your job or abandon your relationships. I mean, what's one thing today that you thought was essential that you could just release? The third principle is what I call the redirect. Diogenes would walk through Athens, the most philosophically dense city on earth, and he'd do these deliberately absurd things. He'd eat in the marketplace when everyone was supposed to eat at home. He'd talk to himself loudly. He'd point out the obvious flaws in people's logic while they were walking by. Why? Because he'd realized something that most philosophers still hadn't. The thinking you think is so original and important, it's usually just recycled conditioning. We spend so much energy thinking thoughts that aren't even ours. Worries we inherited from our parents. Ambitions we copied from people we followed. Standards we internalized from a culture that doesn't actually know us. Diogenes would interrupt this. He'd ask a simple question. Who decided this? Why am I believing this? Is this actually true, or is it just a story everyone's agreed on? There's a modern application here that's almost shocking in its simplicity. You're stressed about something. Actually stop and ask, who told me this was important? Did I decide this, or did I inherit it? What would I want if no one were looking? That question alone can dissolve so much unnecessary suffering. The fourth principle is about misplaced shame. See, most of us think Diogenes was about shocking people for no reason, but he wasn't a chaos agent. He was a philosopher making a point about what's actually worth being ashamed of. He'd pee in the marketplace not because he was a weirdo. Okay, maybe he was a little, but because he wanted to ask this question, what is it that makes you uncomfortable? The fact that I have a body? The fact that I'm doing something normal in the wrong place? Or is it that I've revealed the fiction of your propriety? Here's the thing nobody tells you. You've probably been ashamed of the wrong things your entire life. You've been ashamed of your vulnerability, ashamed of asking for help, ashamed of not knowing something, ashamed of changing your mind, ashamed of having needs. Meanwhile, you've probably walked right past actual things worth examining. The way you spoke to someone when you were frustrated, the time you didn't say something you should have, the moments you compromised your own integrity because it was easier. Diogenes was asking what deserves your shame actually, and his answer was pretty clear: only betraying yourself, only being less than you're capable of. Everything else is just noise. The fifth principle is about virtue as the only real good. This is where Diogenes of Babylon and Diogenes of Sinope actually agree, and it's crucial. Both of them understood that the Stoic hierarchy goes like this. Virtue is the only real good. Everything else, health, wealth, status, comfort, these are neutral. They're indifferent. They only matter if they help you or harm you ethically. Most of us have it backwards. We think the hierarchy is success, then money, then comfort, then maybe we'll have time for character. We're playing the game in the wrong order. Diogenes would literally ask wealthy people, you have money, does that make you virtuous? The answer was usually no. And he'd say, then what are you talking to me about? I'm interested in what makes a human actually free. Money, that's a story for children. Here's how this translates. You make a choice today. Maybe it's small. Maybe you're deciding whether to send a text you know will manipulate someone, or whether to take credit for something you didn't do, or whether to actually tell the truth when lying would be easier. That moment, that's where your real wealth lives. Not in the outcome, not about whether you get caught or get away with it, but in the fact that you're choosing integrity. That's the only currency that actually compounds. The sixth principle is about the discipline of perception. Both Diogenes philosophers understood something that modern Stoicism sometimes glosses over. Your perception isn't neutral. It's trained. Diogenes of Sinope would walk through the market and see human beings obsessing over things. The same objects everyone else wanted, the same fears everyone else had. And because he trained himself to see differently, he could see the comedy in it. Not meanly, but clearly. Marcus Aurelius talks about this too. You can train yourself to see events more clearly. You can strip away the stories and see what's actually happening. Right now, you're upset about something. Let's zoom in. You're upset about something because you're interpreting it a certain way. But the event itself, it's morally neutral. Your manager gave you feedback. Fact. Your interpretation. This means I'm not good enough. Interpretation. These aren't the same thing. Diogenes trained himself to see the difference constantly. It's like cleaning a lens. The more you do it, the clearer everything becomes. The seventh principle is about freedom actually defined. We talk about freedom like it's external, like it's a place you get to, like you'll finally be free when you have enough money, or when you quit your job, or when you find the right person. But Diogenes of Sinope lived in the most unfree-seeming way possible. He owned almost nothing. He had no status. He couldn't control anyone's opinion of him. And yet everyone who wrote about him used the same word, free. Why? Because he'd realized that freedom isn't the absence of constraints. It's the absence of being a slave to constraints. It's the difference between being in prison and being afraid of being in prison. You can be physically confined and spiritually free. You can have everything and be spiritually imprisoned. The Stoic teaching here is that freedom is internal first. It's the freedom to choose your response. It's the freedom to not care what you're supposed to care about. It's the freedom to walk toward what matters to you, even if everyone else is walking the other direction. The eighth principle is about death, and I mean this gently. All of the Stoic philosophers practiced something called negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum. They would contemplate loss. They would imagine death, their own, and the death of people they loved, not morbidly, but realistically. Because once you've really sat with the fact that everything ends, everything changes, your urgency recalibrates. The thing you've been stressed about for 3 weeks starts to look smaller. Diogenes was famous for pointing out that we're all literally dying, not as a depressing statement, but as a freedom statement. You're not going to be here forever. So what are you actually spending your time on? Is it worth it? I know that sounds heavy, and that's okay. Stoicism isn't supposed to be light, it's supposed to be true. Here's the practical version. Think about someone you love who's no longer alive or who won't be here forever. Now think about the argument you had with them last month. Worth it? Or do you wish you'd been kinder, more present, less defensive? That clarity you have about them, you can have about everyone in your life right now. You don't have to wait until they're gone. The ninth principle is about the only thing that's actually yours. This is the core teaching. Everything else flows from this. Your body, not really yours. It gets sick. It fails you. It eventually stops. Your circumstances, definitely not yours. You don't control the economy. You don't control other people's decisions. You don't control what happens. But your will, your choice, your ability to decide how you're going to respond to what life puts in front of you. That's yours. Actually yours. And the Stoics say this is enough. Not that it's optimal or convenient or comfortable, but that it's enough for a human being to live with complete integrity and peace. Everything else is bonus material. When you really internalize this, something shifts. You stop exhausting yourself trying to control things you can't. You direct all that energy toward the one thing that's actually yours. The 10th principle is about the practice. Here's what nobody talks about. Diogenes of Sinope lived a radically different life than most people, and most people thought he was crazy, and that was okay. But the Stoic practice isn't about being weird for its own sake. It's about being honest about what you need, and not being willing to trade your soul to avoid being uncomfortable. For Diogenes, that meant living simply, asking difficult questions, and not performing for the gallery. For you, it might look completely different, but the principle is the same. What would I be willing to be uncomfortable for? What beliefs would I be willing to challenge? What would I be willing to be seen as wrong about? The practice is the willingness to actually examine your life instead of just living it on autopilot. Okay, so here's where we land. You've been idolizing the wrong Diogenes if you've been chasing sophistication, validation, or the appearance of wisdom. That way leads to anxiety, because you're always checking whether people still think you're impressive. But if you're willing to shift, if you're willing to anchor yourself in what you actually control, simplify what's unnecessarily complex, question what you've been told to believe, and practice choosing integrity over comfort, then you've found something real, something unbreakable. Before you go, I want to ask you something. What's one thing today that you know you're doing for someone else's approval? One thing you could examine. Maybe you keep it. Maybe you can release it. But what if you actually looked at it? That's the practice. And if this landed with you, if this conversation felt like the kind of mentor voice you need in your life, subscribe, come back. Let's dig deeper into how to build a life that's actually yours. You're unbreakable. You're limitless. Now let's start living like it. Thanks for being here.